Okay, so you want to own a car wash. Buy a strip of land on a busy road, install some spinning brushes and a few vacuum stations, and watch cars line up to hand you $20 for something water does for free when it rains. That's the plan in your head, and on the surface it looks almost too simple to be a real business. Drive past any car wash on a Saturday morning and you'll see a line of cars backed up onto the street, people standing around with squeegees, a guy vacuuming his floor mats, money changing hands every 90 seconds. You watch that scene and you think, this is basically a machine that turns water into cash. Here's the problem. You are looking at the 10 best minutes of that location's entire week, and the business underneath it is nothing like what that Saturday morning line makes it look like. The truth is a modern car wash is not really a car cleaning business. It is a real estate play wearing a water hose, bolted to a subscription business that happens to spray your bumper. And once you understand that, the entire economics of this industry starts to make sense, including why private equity firms have quietly been buying up car washes by the hundreds over the last decade. Let's start with what it actually costs to get into this business, because like most of these industries, there isn't one type of car wash. There are several, and each one is a completely different bet. At the bottom end, you have the self-serve bay, coin-operated stalls where the customer does all the work with a pressure wand and their own two hands. These are cheap to build and cheap to run, but they generate the least revenue per square foot of any format in the industry. Above that sits the in-bay automatic, the kind with a single rollover machine that a car pulls into and sits still while the equipment does the work. Above that is the format that has come to dominate the industry over the last 15 years. The exterior express tunnel, a long conveyor system that pulls the car through a sequence of soap, brushes, rinse, and dryers in 3 to 5 minutes flat, with a bank of free vacuums out front. And at the top end, the full-service wash, which combines the tunnel with a team of workers hand-drying, vacuuming interiors, and detailing, charging 2 to 3 times what an express tunnel charges for the same conveyor ride. Each of these is a different answer to the same underlying question. How many cars can you push through? How much labor do you need standing there to do it? And how much are you charging per car versus per month? That decision shapes everything else. Now here's where the naive mental model breaks down immediately. You think the expensive part is the brushes and the soap. It isn't. The expensive part is the same thing it is in almost every physical retail business. The real estate and the machine that has to be engineered into it. A Sirius Express tunnel location needs somewhere between 1 and 2 acres of land, ideally on a high-traffic road with easy in and out access, because the entire business model depends on impulse volume, not destination shoppers seeking you out. That land alone, depending on the market, can run anywhere from $500,000 to well over $2 million. Then comes construction. The tunnel building itself, a purpose-built structure with a conveyor pit, water reclamation systems, and specialized drainage, typically costs $2 to $4 million to build from the ground up once you include the equipment. The tunnel equipment alone, the brushes, the arches, the blowers, the conveyor chain, the chemical injection systems, runs $800,000 to $1.5 million depending on how automated and how long you build it. Add site work, paving a lot large enough for stacking lanes so cars waiting to enter don't spill onto the public road, and you're looking at another few $100,000 just in asphalt and drainage. Add the vacuum stations, the pay terminals, the signage, and the permitting, and a new build express tunnel car wash routinely costs $3.50 to $6 million to open the doors. That is not a typo, and it surprises almost everyone who starts researching this industry expecting a modest local business. Here's the cost nobody budgets for correctly: water. A car wash uses somewhere between 30 and 60 gallons of fresh water per vehicle if it's running an older or poorly designed system. Modern tunnels are required in most jurisdictions to install water reclamation systems that filter, treat, and reuse a large percentage of that water, sometimes recovering 60 to 80% of it for reuse in the earlier wash stages. Those reclamation systems aren't optional extras. They're often mandated by local water authorities, and they cost $150,000 to $400,000 to install properly. Skip it or install it cheaply, and you'll be fighting your municipal water and sewer bill every single month, because most cities charge car washes on a metered commercial rate that's steeper than residential, plus a separate sewer discharge fee calculated on the assumption that everything going down your drain needs treatment. On top of that, you need a wastewater discharge permit, and depending on your state, you may need to test your effluent periodically for oil, grease, and detergent content, because a car wash's runoff is legally treated similarly to industrial wastewater, not household water. Skip this paperwork and the fines are not small. They can run into tens of thousands of dollars and, in repeat cases, shut the location down entirely until you're compliant. Now, the equipment itself is its own trap, similar to what you'd see in a gym. Tunnel machinery runs constantly, exposed to soap, chemicals, and moisture, and it wears down fast. Brush material needs replacing every 12 to 18 months. Conveyor chains need servicing regularly or they seize and shut the whole line down mid-Saturday, the single worst possible moment for a business built on weekend impulse traffic. Chemical costs, the soap, wax, tire shine, and drying agents pumped through the tunnel, run 50 cents to $1.50 per car depending on the wash package, and chemical suppliers know car wash owners are a captive market, so pricing isn't gentle. A mid-size express tunnel doing 150 cars a day can spend $30,000 to $60,000 a year just on chemicals, and that's before a single dollar goes toward equipment maintenance, which itself typically runs another $50,000 to $100,000 annually once the tunnel is a few years old and parts start failing on schedule. Now let's talk about labor, because this is where the express tunnel model made its real innovation, and it's the same innovation that gyms made decades earlier. Cut the labor, keep the revenue. An old-school full-service wash needs a crew of 8 to 15 people standing at the exit, hand-drying and vacuuming every car. That's a payroll of $300,000 to $600,000 a year in most markets. The modern express tunnel model figured out it could strip almost all of that out. A typical express location runs with 2 to 4 employees at a time, mostly greeters directing cars into the tunnel and monitoring the equipment, with free self-serve vacuums out front so customers do their own interior cleaning. That single change, cutting labor from 15 people to 3, is arguably the single biggest reason the express tunnel model has taken over the industry. Payroll for an express location typically runs $150,000 to $250,000 a year, less than half of the full-service model, while charging almost the same price per wash. That's not a small efficiency gain. That's the entire business model shifting underneath the industry in real time. So how does a car wash actually make its money once it's built and staffed? Here's the part that mirrors the gym almost exactly, and it's the single most important idea in this entire business. It's not the one-time customers paying $15 to $25 for a single wash. It's the unlimited monthly membership. Most express tunnel operators now sell a subscription, typically $20 to $40 a month, that lets a customer drive through as many times as they want. On the surface, this feels insane. Why would a business let someone wash their car unlimited times for the price of 1.5 single washes? Because just like the gym membership, almost nobody actually uses it that much. Industry data on car wash memberships shows the average subscriber washes their car somewhere between 1 and 2 times a month, even though they're paying for unlimited access. A customer washing their car twice a month on a $30 unlimited plan is effectively paying $15 a wash, barely more than the one-time price. But the customer who signs up in a burst of enthusiasm after a road trip and then washes their car once every 6 weeks is paying $30 a month for a $15 wash they use maybe 8 times a year. That customer is almost pure profit, and crucially, they cost the business almost nothing in tunnel wear, chemical use, or water because they're simply not showing up most months. Just like the gym, the car wash isn't really selling wash capacity. It's selling a recurring subscription that a large share of subscribers will barely use, while the location only needs enough tunnel throughput to handle the fraction of members who actually show up on a given day, not the total number who pay every month. This changes everything about how the location is designed and priced. It's why express tunnels compete so aggressively on membership price in a given market, sometimes to the point of running $15 unlimited plans that look almost irrational on paper. They're not pricing against the cost of washing one car. They're pricing against customer acquisition and long-term subscriber retention, because a subscriber locked into a monthly charge that quietly renews on their credit card is worth vastly more over 2 or 3 years than a one-time customer who pays cash once and never comes back. Industry churn data suggests unlimited Wash Club members cancel at a rate of roughly 3 to 5% per month, meaning a location has to constantly refill its subscriber base just to stay flat, similar to gym membership churn. And just like gyms, the businesses that survive are the ones that treat that January-style seasonal enthusiasm, in this case a spike after a snowstorm or a stretch of pollen season, as fuel to build a subscriber base rather than a permanent baseline they can spend against. Now let's talk about location, because in this business it is even more brutally specific than in most retail. An express tunnel needs traffic counts of roughly 20,000 to 30,000 vehicles passing per day on the adjacent road just to have a shot at viability. Because the entire model depends on impulse conversion, a tiny fraction of passing traffic deciding to turn in on any given day. That's why you see these locations clustered on the same handful of arterial roads in every city, all fighting over the same handful of qualifying intersections. And the site needs enough queuing space, meaning enough stacking lanes for cars waiting to enter the tunnel, that a rush of demand doesn't back cars up onto the public street, which in many jurisdictions is a code violation that can get your permit pulled entirely. A site that looks perfect but only has room for 4 or 5 stacked cars can bottleneck during peak hours, sending frustrated customers to a competitor down the street. Between the traffic count requirement and the queuing requirement, the list of genuinely viable sites in any given metro area is much shorter than it first appears, and once a good corner gets built, it's effectively gone. Here's where the case study comes in, because this industry has already shown what happens when the math breaks. Over the last decade, car washes became one of the most aggressively consolidated small business categories in America, with private equity firms and roll-up companies buying independent locations by the dozen, financed heavily with debt, on the theory that a portfolio of dozens of tunnel locations with recurring subscription revenue looks a lot like a SaaS company on paper: predictable monthly cash flow, high margins, low churn if managed well. That thesis attracted enormous capital, and it pushed the price paid for a single car wash location to eye-watering multiples of its cash flow, sometimes 12 to 15 times annual earnings for a well-run tunnel, multiples that used to belong to software companies, not places that spray water on Hondas. When interest rates rose sharply starting in 2022, that entire structure came under pressure at once. Roll-up companies that had financed acquisitions with variable rate debt saw their interest costs spike just as consumer discretionary spending tightened, and subscription cancellations ticked up as households cut recurring charges they'd stopped thinking about. Several of the larger private equity-backed car wash chains ended up restructuring their debt or selling off locations at a fraction of what they'd paid just a few years earlier. The same story that played out with Bally Total Fitness and 24-Hour Fitness in the gym industry. Not because people stopped wanting clean cars, but because the capital structure sitting on top of the operating business couldn't survive a shift in the cost of debt. A car wash with a full parking lot and a healthy subscriber count can still be one refinancing away from insolvency if the entity that owns it borrowed too aggressively to buy it in the first place. So let's do the actual break-even math, because this is where the real picture comes together. Say you've built or bought an express tunnel location with fixed monthly costs of roughly $80,000, covering debt service on the land and equipment, payroll, utilities, insurance, and chemical supply contracts. If your average revenue per wash, blending one-time customers and subscription members, works out to roughly $12 once you account for how underused most memberships are, you need somewhere around 6,700 washes a month, or roughly 220 cars a day just to break even. Below that, you're losing money every month. Above it, additional cars are close to pure margin, because remember, the marginal cost of running one more car through the tunnel, mostly water and chemical, is only a couple of dollars. That's the good news. The volatility comes from how weather-dependent this business is in a way that's almost unique among retail. A rainy week can cut walk-up traffic in half, because people reasonably assume there's no point washing a car that's about to get rained on again. Winter in cold climates is actually the industry's best season, because road salt makes people wash more often, but a mild winter with less snow and salt can quietly gut a location's seasonal revenue in a way that has nothing to do with how well the business is run. A new location typically takes 12 to 24 months to build a subscriber base large enough to hit consistent break-even, and every month of that ramp burns through the working capital reserve the owner set aside before opening. Now let's put the two scenarios side by side, because this is where the honest picture of this business lies. In the optimistic scenario, you picked a site with strong traffic counts, built out a well-engineered tunnel that doesn't nickel and dime you on maintenance in year 2, kept membership churn on the low end of normal, and built your subscriber base past the break-even line within the first 18 months. Under those conditions, a well-run express tunnel location can generate $1.50 to $2.50 million a year in revenue with net margins in the 20 to 30% range once it's mature, some of the healthiest margins in small-format retail, translating to owner cash flow that can comfortably clear $300,000 to $500,000 a year on a single location. That's the number that pulled private equity into this industry in the first place. In the realistic scenario, 2 or 3 ordinary things go wrong. A competing tunnel opens 18 months later on the same arterial road 2 miles away and starts a membership price war, cutting into your subscriber growth rate when you needed it most to hit break-even. A mild winter with less road salt suppresses volume for 4 months straight. Equipment starts needing more frequent repairs earlier than the maintenance schedule assumed, adding another $3,000 to $5,000 a month to overhead. Under those conditions, that same location can slide from a healthy double-digit margin into a low single-digit margin, or into a loss during the slow months, even while the vacuum stalls out front still look reasonably busy most Saturdays. And just like the mall and the gym, almost none of that swing shows up as a single dramatic event. It's a slightly softer winter, a slightly higher churn rate, a slightly heavier repair bill, compounding quietly month after month until the number at the bottom of the spreadsheet looks nothing like the pitch deck that got the location financed in the first place. So if you're picturing yourself owning a car wash, remember what actually determines whether it works. It was never really about how many cars you can get to pull in off the road on a sunny Saturday. It's about how well the fixed costs of that tunnel, the debt, the water system, the payroll hold up against the reality that most of your subscribers will barely use what they're paying for every single month, and whether the capital structure sitting on top of the business can survive the one season where the weather simply doesn't cooperate.